What's happening, fam? L.A.R. movement still moving. Book is entitled Lessons from a Non-Custodial Father at Amazon, Kindle, and Create Space. Link will be in the description box below as usual. Go get it. PayPal link there also. They asked me to put it up, so I put it up. Thanks everybody for supporting. This video is entitled The People of Color Hypocrisy. So on Netflix, I'm watching the white supremacy, the white privilege thing with Chelsea Handler. Like, hello privilege, it's me, Chelsea, I think. So it made me think about this topic where part of the conversation is like people of color, people of color, people of color. I was listening to the Young Turks talk about people of color, people of color, people of color. And as a black man, it's quite hypocritical to me that when we talk about discrimination and oppression and racism in this country, we like to say people of color. And the reason why I say that is because when you look at all the oppression in the vast majority, not all, the vast majority of oppression and racism and just privilege and lack of privilege, you're really going to predominantly go to images and situations with black men. That's what's going to happen. So why I say it's the people of color hypocrisy is because you even have black women bring up people of color. But when they bring up the oppression of they normally say black people, or the black community. But even when the women bring up the systematic part of, the prison industrial complex and drug laws and even like housing and lynchings, what are all of those tied into? Predominantly happening to men. And when I say predominantly, I'm not talking 51%. I'm talking more like 70, 80, 88 I give a tops. I wouldn't go to 90, but predominantly black men. So when other people say this is what's been going on with my group and this is what's been going on with us and this is how America is, why I call it a people of color hypocrisy is because the vast majority of these situations black men aren't necessarily talking about. It's people who are quote unquote people of color who aren't black men who are trying to interject their quote unquote struggle into our history in this country. When they bring up voter acts, you see civil rights movement, predominantly men. When you bring up sharecropping, predominantly men. When you bring up slavery, I know people don't like to hear this, but predominantly men. And what I mean by predominantly men, the majority of slavery in America with black people was predominantly men. Women were brought on the back end of slavery. They weren't there from the beginning of the enslavement of black people in America. Because in the beginning, it was black men who were the slaves in America. For maybe 150 to 240 years, something like that. But the women were brought in the last 80 years of slavery. It had already went on for maybe a century and a half. And I'm not saying the women weren't enslaved. I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is this people of color hypocrisy. You don't see quote unquote Hispanics and Asians, Hispanics, Asians. Even I'm gonna get into this part real quick. When you bring up people of color in America, you don't even bring up Native Americans, black and brown people. You don't even include Native Americans. This is part of the hypocrisy. Look at the oppression of the people of color, black and brown people. Well, you would consider the Native Americans red people to a degree. And so when you say black and brown, you never say red or yellow. But everybody says this is what happened to my people in this country. But this is another part of the hypocrisy. A lot of you non-black and non-white people participated in the racism and oppression. Now, I get that you dealt with racism and oppression. I'm not going to sit here as a hypocrite and say you didn't. But what I'm going to say is you participated. You know, you got racism and oppression, and you dished it out to us too. So when it's us, it's okay. When it's you, it's not okay. But, you know, and like Mexican culture, they had, during the civil rights movement, they had their own, it's kind of like a civil rights-esque movement about agriculture and farming. You know, because all this, you know, Mexicans working the land thing, that had been going on since the 60s. But the Hispanic populations who were quote unquote Chicano back then, they didn't get involved in civil rights. So to get involved and talk about black and brown issues now, it's like you set that out 50 years ago. Now, it's nothing wrong to say, okay, yo, maybe it was never a conversation to say maybe we shouldn't have set out civil rights. Maybe we shouldn't have just left y'all hanging like that. Now we get it. You know, my people can understand it. I got you. Asians, it's the same thing. You know, Chinese, Japanese. Oh, we built the railroads. Did you really? And I brought this up a long time ago. If Asians built the railroads, they should have a John Henry story on their own. John Henry shouldn't be a Disney story about a black man working the railroads against a machine. It shouldn't. It should be an Asian man. Am I lying? No, I'm not. You know, but part of the hypocrisy, because part of the hypocrisy was also, you know, the people of color hypocrisy is women and what is the LGBT community. They're really trying to hop into people of color. There's people of color and women and LGBT. Like, no. Because nobody told, like black men predominantly, nobody told you we wanted to be people of color. Because when we were giving this country our blood, sweat, and tears, we weren't people of color. It was them. When we were dying on the front lines, we weren't people of color. It was them. You know, when our inventions were getting stolen, we weren't people of color. Like, I had a conversation with somebody about, you know, well, the Asians have Chinatown. Yeah, because they never burnt their cities down. Don't act like, okay, because there's a Chinatown in every city in America, every major city, that why do black people can't do that? Well, would the Chinatowns exist if they'd have burnt them all down? Would the Chinatowns exist if, I don't know, let's just say the government made sure that they couldn't get the land, or they'll run a freeway through it, or eminent domain, and if that doesn't work, you know, crime and drugs. I'm just saying. But we people of color, nah. You know, because part of the thing with Chelsea Handler was white people can't deal with white privilege because they don't see it because they're white. You living in a white world in a white bubble around white people, you don't see the quote unquote discrimination and oppression you're giving out to the world. You know it exists, but you never see it because everybody you're around is white, so they don't do it to you. So how in the hell are you gonna turn right around and be part of the women and people of color and LGBT and this, that, and the third? No. If you this is why people said hold your own nuts. You know what I'm saying? Because let's let you stand on your own movement. And when you come to people of color, you know, the part of the hypocrisy is I know your story. But I noticed that you don't want to tell anybody your story when you bring up people of color, but you use us as, you know, the imagery of it because you know good and hell well your story ain't really that bad. you benefited more than you got oppressed. So, and like, I'm not, if black men predominantly, then black women, but in the Native Americans, men and women, had dealt with the most shit in this country. So that's just my thoughts on this. Like, share, subscribe. Catch y'all on the next one. Peace.